Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComms and the associated websites, services, information resources, activities for people who work in and around the global MedComms community, by which I mean medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and indeed for those people who want to join MedComms. And these webinars are a great way of involving people from all over the world, actually, to discuss topics of interest to the community. Today, I'm absolutely delighted that we've got 4 medical publications professionals, and we're going to talk about working in pubs, basically, which is a big part of the MedComms world. Just to get a little bit of a plug-in, but the point, I guess, today is we've recently published another FirstMedCommsJob careers guide about publications professionals, authored by John, who's here, and supported by Envision, and they're represented today by Kat, Andrea, and Roz. So this is just going to be a panel session today. We're just going to talk, and we would like the audience today to feed us their questions and their comments. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is ask the panelists to introduce themselves. How did they get to where they've got to, and the sort of role they've got at the moment, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So on that note, John, I'm going to hand over to you to lead the way.
Thank you, Peter. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending this. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes introducing myself and saying how I got to where I am today. And of course, this is all in the context of working as a medical publications professional. I started at the very beginning doing a degree in pharmacy. And interestingly, at that time, when you become a pharmacist, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with healthcare professionals, and you're also dealing with patients. So that's really where I started. Then I moved on and I did my PhD, so I was involved with research and I worked in academia. After that, got into medical writing, project management, and business development. And I worked at a company called ADIS, and that was both a MedComms agency, but it was also a publisher. So there's a lot of exposure there to publishing. Then I joined the pharmaceutical industry. I joined AstraZeneca, and I worked as a publications manager. I worked in various therapy areas. And of course there, I was working with publishers. I'd be working with external experts. I don't like to use the word KOLs, by the way. And I also had roles in what we call professional relations, and that involved organizing advisory boards, meetings, standalone meetings, and so forth, scientific exchange meetings. And what I got there was exposure to sort of regulations and the environment. For example, I worked under a corporate integrity agreement. And then I moved back into publications. I worked on policy, processes, and skills development. So it's almost like a broad, the work for AstraZeneca was quite broad, but it gave exposure to working externally with experts, not forgetting patients, but also working in a highly regulated environment. Then I left AstraZeneca and I set up my own consultancy, which is Solano Medical Communications. So I've been doing publications, and a lot of what I did at AstraZeneca and prior to that. I'm currently on assignment to a small biotech company in Belgium, and I'm back doing publications. But interestingly, whilst a lot of this is familiar, based on the experience, the background, the stuff I've done before, actually some differences. And the differences are working within a small environment, small company, versus what's termed as a big pharma. So it's back to working with healthcare professionals and doing quite a bit of patient work, but it's also given me the opportunity to work early in the development process. So, for example, working with the preclinical groups, and a lot of that sometimes doesn't happen in pharma. So that's where I've landed here now. New assignment, pulling on what I've learned, but also there's always something new to learn. There's always something new to do in this environment. That about sums it up.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Thanks. And one of the points we're going to be making today and drawing out straight away is the fact that this is very much a team approach. There are a number of people involved in the publications management program and so on. So, John, you're sort of coming at it sort of, as it were, from the pharma, biotech, the funder side of things. Can we just introduce the Envision guys? Kat, I'm going to go around in alphabetical order. So, Kat, could you just sort of explain again who you are, where you're from, and what you do, as it were, and we'll work our way around the panel. So over to you, Kat.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. So I'm my name's Kat Ayling-Rouse, and I'm a content specialist at Envision Pharma. So my journey began when I did a degree in biomedical sciences at Bristol University, and then I did an MSc in immunology at Sheffield Uni. My first postgraduate job was as a research associate at Novartis, and it was very early on in the drug development cycle. I was screening candidate compounds for use in respiratory diseases. We got to go to a lot of congresses and scientific meetings, and although I really loved the bench work and the science, I started to realise that I'd quite like to do something a bit more creative. I've always loved writing and language, and I've always been a bit of an avid reader. So I started to look for something that could combine that with my interest in science. A few years later, I saw an advert in the New Scientist magazine for a trainee medical writer, and I applied for the job, and I joined their very short 6-week training scheme. After that, it was very much on the job training. It's quite challenging when you first get into medical writing. It's a steep learning curve, and you get lots of constructive comments coming back from people. You have to be quite thick-skinned, I think. But I really enjoyed it, and I realised that it really was the career that I wanted to be involved with. I took a year off on maternity leave, and when I came back, I joined a more local agency, and I was there for 13 years. So I really got a broad range of projects. I worked on a lot of things, and then most recently, I was offered a position at Envision Pharma, and I've been here for just over 3 years.
Excellent. If I unmute myself, thank you. Okay, so that gives us a sense of where you're talking from. Sorry, Roz, let's stick with the alphabetical order. Roz, you're next.
Yeah, so my name's Roz Bonomally, and I'm a medical writer at Envision. My background is as a paediatric nurse, so not necessarily a typical medical writer background. I realised quite early on in my degree that whilst I enjoyed aspects of direct patient care, I really loved writing the assignments and getting absorbed in the writing process. I did consider going down a more academic route after I graduated, but it didn't sit quite right for me not to consolidate my degree with clinical practice. So I worked clinically for a year or so after graduating, but then ended up moving to Norway. And when I landed in Norway, I realised I was back at square one in terms of my career. My degree wasn't recognised and I couldn't speak the language. So I was able to get a place in a master's degree. So I studied for a master's while completing the additional studies I needed to get my professional qualification recognised and getting my Norwegian language skills up to scratch. A few years later, I moved to Switzerland and found myself in a similar situation. I had a nursing degree that wasn't recognised in Switzerland, and I couldn't speak German. So I knew from my experience in Norway that it would take a few years to get to the stage where I could work in a nursing role in Switzerland. So I had a big think about what I really wanted to do and realised it was time to move away from nursing. So I knew I wanted my new career to utilise my nursing background, but also my writing skills. And after a lot of searching, I came across medical writing as a career, which seemed to be the perfect fit. So I was able to find my first role as a medical writer whilst living in Switzerland, and I joined Envision shortly after moving to London in 2016.
And excellent again, thank you very much. Well, I won't test your Norwegian skills because I wouldn't be able to do it. So it's a nice story. So Andrea, you're the fourth and final panelist as well. So Andrea, over to you. Sorry.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Cifelli. I'm a global operations lead at Envision Pharma with specific responsibility for looking after our scientific writing teams. And my journey is incredibly similar to Kat's, actually. My degree is biomedical science. I moved from Edinburgh, where I did my degree, to London to work in medical research. at both the Middlesex and then the Royal Brompton hospitals. And like Kat, I decided it wasn't really kind of what I wanted to do in the long term. And also like Kat, flicking through the New Scientist back pages, because there was no NetworkPharma then, there was no Peter. I saw a job advertised in medical affairs at Glaxo Group Research, as it was then, and GSK as it is now. I ended up there in medical affairs as medical communications lead for their respiratory franchise of certain products in their franchise. And like John, it was a very broad remit, working in pubs, doing meetings, MedComms type projects. Things were really quite different in those days. Doing a lot of external professional relations work as well. I kind of didn't really want to go on in big pharma. I wanted a more kind of small company feel, and it just so happened one of my friends worked at an agency that was looking for medical writers, and as it turns out, exactly the same one that Kat spent 13 years at, I also ended up spending 13 years at. I joined that agency as a writer. I moved, so I had gone from client side to agency side. And I never really regretted that. I moved through writing into the client services account management side, and then took on a more operational role. That's that, and I've moved around a little bit since in client services operational side. Like John, I've done some sort of freelance consulting. So yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. There's lots of opportunities. At Envision, I have an operations role, so I don't do much writing myself, but I have that broad experience. And I do occasionally get involved in helping out with some of our patient-focused work, which I think we'll probably talk about later, because that's a really interesting development that's really happened in the last few years. So that's me. Thank you.
Excellent. No, that's terrific. And I love these webinars on and this sort of stage of the webinar when we're hearing from people about your backgrounds and so on. And I hope people watching this get as much value as I do out of just hearing the different backgrounds and the insights into people. I think this is one of the great things about these sorts of meetings. So thank you very much for introducing yourselves. To those in the audience, just do use those two text boxes. So you've got a chat box and a Q&A box. You can send us your comments, your observations, and your questions, importantly, and we'll weave that into the discussion. Okay, and we will have a discussion for the next 25 minutes or so. I just wanted to start perhaps by putting some context on this for everybody. I'm sort of stating the obvious, but maybe it's not obvious. What we're talking about today is talking about working in medical publications management. That's a big part of MedComms, but it's not by any ways the only part of MedComms. And we've already had a question about the differences between pubs and other types of work, which we can come back to. But the pubs business is big. Some agencies concentrate more on pubs than others, and so on. But I just think talking about pubs is interesting, but understanding the context of that bigger world. And as I said earlier, the important thing about pubs is, and the way we're addressing it today, is there's a variety of people involved in any sort of a plan and so on. Okay, so that's just trying to put some context on this. Okay, what I thought we'd do just to begin with, if we may, we're in December 2020. COVID has disrupted the year. It's caused all sorts of problems. Some of us are either in or out, or as of today, I think we're coming out in the UK of lockdown and so on. It's disrupted working life. But what's it done to the publications business? Your sort of work, not so much how you work with your work homes, but what's it doing to the publications business? Has it opened up opportunities, challenges, whatever? So before I put words in your mouth, can I just get some input from all of you? But start with John, and maybe from the sort of pharma biotech side. What do you see as the consequences of what's been happening this year from a sort of publications point of view?
Well, one of the things that's happened is that certain trials have been delayed. So that's now sort of built in. That's pushed deadlines out. The other thing that I've seen is certain authors, contributors have been distracted, obviously by COVID, because they're treating patients. So they are either not able to respond, or they say, I can't get onto this now, it'll be in such time period. So I think those are the some obvious consequences. On the plus side, what you've got is, I think, the fact that everything's been done virtually this year. It's driven some of the technological changes that actually were not new. They were around. These things were happening, but it's actually brought them to the forefront and actually for example, some of the conference organizers have had to actually listen up. This is the way it's going to happen in the future. So you're actually not prepared. You know, some of these third parties were not prepared. But what it's done is that, for example, we have these QR codes, been around for ages, so QR codes linking to additional information and linking to voiceovers and videos. So it's driven those sorts of changes. And of course, what will happen is that when we come out of COVID, these will be the norm when we actually go back to meeting face to face. So there's some positive aspects to it. I think it's pushed. It's a bit like the high street. It's shopping high street. It's driven it. The change has come in. It was inevitable, but what COVID has done is it's accelerated it.
Yeah, okay, and I think that's probably going to be a common theme, this acceleration of things. And just to pick up on one point, and just as an observation, you said that one of the problems I guess you've had is that authors, investigators are distracted. They actually haven't got the time to write up or be involved in the writing process. Are there another group that have actually got plenty of time? I mean, one of the comments that I've seen talked about quite a lot is the submission rates have gone up through the roof in the journals, because actually some of the lab people or whatever clinicians are actually not able to do what they're supposed to be doing, and they've got on and they've cleared the backlog of papers that they were supposed to be writing. I mean, do you see that? Is that just a different group of research, or do you see any impact on what you've done there, John, or is it more the former than what I'm suggesting?
Actually, I guess the only comment I'd make is that for internal people, they still have got the time to do this. It hasn't actually hasn't delayed what internal people do. As to whether a lot of those bench researchers, can't comment on that. I've not actually seen it, but I think it's a theoretical possibility.
Okay, that's an interesting point. So because we're talking really about the clinician. I mean, okay, there might be writing teams and so on, but the clinicians are involved, but they're actually quite busy at the moment for obvious reasons. So I shouldn't get too distracted by that idea that some of the journals are seeing 20, 30, 40% increase submission rates. It's a different sort of publications business. Okay, so let's bear that in mind. Okay, let's move around a little bit. I'm gonna jump around a little bit. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna go to Andrea. Why not? What have you seen from an Envision point of view? As I say, concentrate on this sort of impact on the publication sort of business.
I mean, I think there's the two sides. I think John sort of touched on this in his answer. There's the two sides to the publications business, which is the what you may think of as publications, which are the manuscripts and the reviews and the things that get published in journals. Then there are the Congress elements. So when you submit your scientific posters and oral presentations. So both of those have been impacted in slightly different ways. And certainly at Envision over the last few years, we've done more and more of those online types of things, of those additional types of outputs. The QR code poster thing is not new, but I think as you talked about, it's expanded a great deal. And there have been some additional challenges. Certainly, obviously, people are not physically going to those meetings. And I know that Roz had a good example the other day of some stuff that they were doing in their team where they were working with companies who were doing oral presentations. Obviously, they couldn't be done in person. So maybe pass over to Roz to just talk about what they've been doing there, because that's quite a very specific thing.
Okay, excellent. Roz, over to you. There you go.
Yeah, no, sorry. So I just remember, like, early on in the year, I got my first taste of the changes that were coming when the when presenters were not able to travel to congresses. Early in the year, this was related to Congress in Asia. So we had to suddenly quickly work out the best strategy for that, and so our solution was to record the presentation, which seems so normal now, but back in February that was a new way of working.
Can I actually just pick up on that point? And an important point that Andrea's made there, and it is one we need to make, is that when we talk about publications, we're not just talking about the article in a journal, it's the whole Congress side. And that we just need to be clear about that, because people think about events, business, Congress as setting up the event or running the event, but actually there's a whole publishing side to it. So, but separate those two out just for a moment. And maybe Kat, you've got a view on this one. And picking up on what's just been said. So the Congress organizers have rushed to bring in platforms which have opened up all sorts of opportunities. And maybe we'll pursue that in a minute, but with the publishers from where you're sitting, have they rushed to open up opportunities to do more on their online platforms and so on? you see what I'm saying? And can you just comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen is an awful lot more journals wanting these things called publication enhancers.
Right.
These are things that accompany a publication, and so they expand the reach of the publication. They make it more impactful, more visual, and more accessible. So these are things like graphical abstracts. So that's like one image really that encapsulates the main message of the article, and it's great for the reader. They can really see what the take-home messages are. And most recently, we've been working on things called infographics. And these are a bit more than a graphical abstract. This is like a one-page summary of an article. Again, it's very striking, very visual. And there's sort of why the study was done and what was learnt from the study. So again, lots of images and bullet pointed text, and it just really adds to publications, and I think it's just a more modern way of putting forward a more traditional format.
And just go a little bit further with that. So publication enhancers, let's use that terminology. Infographics is a great example. And what other sorts of enhancements and additional activity might a publisher be looking to support?
Quite often videos.
So like video abstracts, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and quite often you may get like a talking head, a presenter coming on and you know, explaining the article. That seems to be quite popular at the moment.
And podcasts, for instance, that gets talked about a bit. So more people looking for doing podcasts.
Haven't really worked on those at all, actually, but yeah, that is something that a journal would offer. Yeah.
Okay, and there's certainly, and we can talk more about it. There's these options out there. But what I'm interested, I think what you said was, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said the journals or publishers were looking for that. Is the pressure coming from the publishers to take advantage of those opportunities, or from the funders, the pharma side to do it, or from the MedComms agency to do it, or from the authors, investigators, and so on to do it? You see what I mean? Do you get any sense of where the pressures are coming from?
I think it's both. I mean, the journals are very open to these enhancers, and the clients are interested depending on their budget, basically, and their capacity to work on something like that, because it takes an awful lot of review. But I'm finding more clients are open to these ideas.
Okay, so and let's bring John in. Can I, with your client hat on, yeah? So, but you see what I'm getting at. I mean, we've been talking about, and some of us have been talking about this for a long time, you know, and why aren't people doing more of it? And it's usually a combination of budget from the client end, the regulatory, the approval, compliance type stuff, and in fairness, the journal publishers who say yes, we can do it, but actually the platforms aren't really that developed, so it might be a bit more of a struggle than some of them say, sort of thing. That's accelerated. We use that word, accelerated fast. I'm just interested where the press comes. So from your point of view, as it were, on the client side, how enthusiastically are you pushing that, or again, are you responding to what's going on around you? See what I mean?
I think some years ago these would have been described as really, really nice to haves, but we've got too much to do, and there's other priorities. Now it's almost becoming like the norm, and we're getting a lot of requests from authors as well. And we're thinking, this is the publications environment. We need to be thinking about enhanced content. We need to be thinking about discoverability. We need to be thinking about added value. We need to be thinking about, you know, Kat talked about those infographics, you know, where you can actually capture a whole manuscript on a page and actually see what's going on. We're thinking all the time about patients, so that the traditional manuscript from all those years ago didn't actually meet that needs. So now we've got these tools, and yes, we're using them, and you're going to see more and more of it, and it actually adds value, you know, to what we do. It adds value. In the old days, I used to describe, you know, the publishing process as two-dimensional. You know, it was something in a journal, and it sat on a shelf in a library. That's all gone now. Those are two-dimensional. This is multi-dimensional now. So this is the way it is, and lots of requests from authors to do this, and less. I think there's less worry about compliance with this, because it's not like new technology and an unknown environment. So it's a lot easier to do now.
I think the other thing that's interesting though is possibly that it's being driven by the community out there. I mean, we talked about this the other day, that in the past, when I started, everything was published. There was a generation of doctors, that's what they expected. So your audience was very much looking for those very traditional means of communication. And what our challenge was to try and see how we could take things beyond the manuscript and communicate it more broadly. These days, that the generation of doctors and our audience coming through expect different types of communication. They don't want to sit down with their monthly posted copy of the BMJ or whatever. They want to have that information delivered to them in the way that everything else is delivered. So thinking about the audiences and thinking about how to reach people whose lives are kind of surrounded by the whole social media environment is another thing that kind of drives that, as well as, I think John mentioned it, this idea that patients are becoming much more engaged, much more involved, and want to know that information. And it would be very difficult for most patients to sort of read through something and get the most out of it if they're reading a really heavy journal article. But the sorts of things that Kat was describing, the infographics, the easily summarized and easily digestible information is partly driven, I think, by the recognition that we need to communicate beyond the very sort of senior experienced professionals to the patient groups as well.
Okay, and I guess that's what I was trying to draw out, because that's my feeling is, having talked about these sorts of things for a very long time, and all you get are barriers put in the way. What's happened this year as part of this acceleration, and it happens to all sorts of businesses, is the community have gone, stop faffing around, let's just get on with it, because that's what we want to do. And suddenly the rush sort of happens, and people do stuff that 6 months ago they'd have said there were too many problems to do, sort of thing. And just before, and just out of interest, just to stick with this just for a moment, I mean, one of the things, again, we would have talked about before, a video abstract sounds very simple to me. And I used to say, well, you got an iPhone, just do one, sort of thing. And I always used to be told, no, it's much more complicated than that. But actually, talking to publishers and other people, that's a lot of what's happening now. You don't need a full studio to do the video abstract with your opinion leader and so on, do you? So again, there's a recognition that we can relax a little bit and do stuff that works quite well. But to come back, just out of interest, not to lose the point, but the compliance side, the sign off, the approvals of everything, there are more complications with videos, interviews, and all the rest of it. I guess is just a statement of fact. But again, do you see that? And I think, John, maybe you implied it, or if you didn't say it, that we've all relaxed a little bit about that sort of stuff. But do you see that within the clients, that there's a relaxation of concern about the compliance, the signing off the script type side of things? Do you see what I mean?
Can I just say that it's not that the compliance is loose now. It's just that there's an acceptance that, for example, in the same way that you got a manuscript that you send in for sign off or whatever, you can have a script, or you can have additional information that again gets reviewed and signed off as okay. So it's the same process. But
okay,
I think
go on. Sorry.
The loose bit was, I'm not sure. We can't do that, or it's a bit difficult, and I'm not, all that, okay. That sort of stuff.
No, and that's a fair correction. Sorry, I wasn't trying to suggest that the approval was loose. It's just, you can lighten up a little bit and things can happen a bit sort of more easily and quickly and all the rest of it, yeah. And I guess it's the same with peer review and so on. I mean, they're getting all sorts of things to appear, to approve now and review. And again, there might have been more hesitation before it all happened, but now it's happening. It's becoming part of the work cycle, sort of thing. So okay, so that's all making sense. What I wanted to do was just pick up on the patient side, because and not lose that, because you were going very much down that line, Andrea. Just that, and the more diverse audience, the opening up content, whether it's infographic, but the principle is we want more people to get access to this and find it in the first place, discoverability and so on. So let's just address the PLS side of it specifically, because that's what some of the people were going, I've heard PLS, what does it mean? So just perhaps jump to PLS, explain it, and then maybe between us, we'll put a little bit of context on that. Yeah, is that okay? And Andrea, sure. You led our way into that one, so you go with that.
Okay, so PLS is patient lay summary. So it's where you put together a summary for that is suitable for patients to understand. So you're summarizing a fairly, complicated clinical paper, whatever, in a way that the patients can understand. And I think that applies not just to publications, but to other types of things as well. And I think one of the things that that Envision has very heavily got involved in over the last few years is this whole idea of patient communication. And we have a specific group called Envision the Patient, who have been really kind of at the forefront of driving these things. So, it's probably been in the last 3 or 4 years. And the initial focus on that was to get patients involved in publications as reviewers, as discussing them. We developed a plain language toolkit. We support the clients in understanding how that works, what they should think about in their publication steering committees. And we're starting to develop things like tools for patients as co-authors, for example. And we have a big sort of training for all of our writers who get involved in writing these patient materials. But it's actually gone beyond publications to things like, and I know we're talking specifically about publications, but patient involvement in things like advisory boards and things like that. So it's a really key thing, and a lot of it is being driven by patient requests. They're kind of driving the need for us to develop mechanisms for working with those patients to get input and to feedback. We have patient reviewers for a lot of the stuff that we do, so we can say, does this read in a way that a patient would understand? And although we train everybody to write in that sort of very plain language way, we do get quite a lot of good feedback. So it's a really kind of important part of our business, and we have quite strong collaborations with external associations, such as, I think it's a PFMD, I think Patient Focused Medicines Development, and things like that.
Okay. So can I cut in, because I want to clarify this, at least clarify the confusion. Okay, and we've had a bit of a question already. So you very specifically said there is patient lay summaries. And I don't think, I personally am in the camp that says it's not a patient, it's a plain language summary. And there's confusion over the terminology that's used. And part of the confusion is that, and quite rightly and understandably, and following your line of thought, what there was an argument to open it up to patients, but actually, and they got called patient summaries at the same time as clinical trial registries started talking about lay summaries and so on. But in publishing terms, let's just at least acknowledge that there's still some confusion. And a lot of people talk about plain language summaries specifically because they may not be intended for the patient. They're intended to open up access to what might be a complex paper, open up access to interested people who may just be more generalist rather than the specialist or whatever, down a spectrum to patient groups, informed patients, and so on. So I want to say PLS to me is a plain language summary. You specifically use the patient language summary, and I don't want to get bogged down in this, but do you agree with what I'm saying and the confusion around there, and acknowledge that that's the case, and that there is the patient lay summary is perhaps an end of the spectrum? Is that all? Just can we all just nod and agree with that, or am I causing more confusion by talking about it?
No, I'll nod in agreement with it. I think from our point of view, our focus is very much at that patient engagement end of that process, though. So that's really kind of where I was coming from.
Exactly, and you guys at Envision have done a lot in that area, and not just about this sort of thing, but also patient authorship and boards and all that. But I just think it's important for the audience to understand. I think PLS would more typically be plain language summary. Just out of interest, we've got some questions popping up. I'm trying to keep a couple of them. Roz, I wanted to bring you in just out of interest because I'm going to pursue the patient, having said what I've just said. But patients getting involved and writing for patients, and certainly for broader audiences, is that something you've got personally involved in beyond writing the basic paper for the specialist? Do you see what I'm saying? And how do you find that style of writing, just out of interest?
Yeah, so plain language summary is not something I typically write on a daily basis. They're not something that we've typically done on our team, but we do have a patient team. I have supported the patient team with writing the plain language summaries. I've certainly supported them. And for me, with a clinical background, it's very nice to do that alternative type of writing. It's very different to take a very scientific abstract and kind of turn it into a language that is more meaningful to a patient audience. Different way of working and a really nice variety.
And it's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, and there's all sorts of arguments over quite, what level you pitch it at and all the rest of it, which is a whole webinar in itself. And Carla's asked a question specifically to you, Roz, so let's go with this for a little bit. We're going off in a different direction here. But with a clinical background, were you limited to clinical publications? Were you involved in preclinical and life sciences publications? So just address that question, because I think there's, again, some context there of what we mean by medical writers and clinic and whatever. So you address Carla's question. I think that will open up a little bit more discussion.
Yeah, so certainly my experience at Envision is when you start, you're kind of assigned to an account, and that account has a certain specific therapy area. I was very nicely matched with an account and therapy area that met or was aligned with my background. And then when you're working with that account, you're very much, what you do is very much based on what the client wants. So I would not say that it's really affected the deliverables I work on. I work with colleagues who have a biochemistry background, biology background, and we all work on the same kind of projects. But I know that initially I was matched on an account that certainly was aligned with what I had previous experience with.
Okay, so part of the point there is that you don't, I mean, people sometimes think if I'm going to be a medical writer, I have to have that medical or healthcare professional type background, which is a no, yeah. There's lots of scientists, in fact, mostly scientists who are doing this. You're trained to pick up this, to be able to do the job. And equally, if you have got that medical background, you're not constrained that way, because you're all being trained to deal with the sort of content we're talking about and communicate in appropriate ways to appropriate audience, etc., etc. So I think that's just worth clarifying. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of value having the nursing background, but just as much, John's got a pharmacy background and so on. Yeah, so that's just maybe understanding that. Luca, sorry, I understand that medical publication business is different from scientific publication business. We could get a bit bogged down in this, but let's just get a sense of, I mean, the medical publications business we're talking about is basically, clinical trial data funded by industry, the process of doing that, as opposed to scientific publications. I'm not sure how would you define the difference, would you? John, would you answer that in a different way to Luca? And can you explain how it might be different, or what the implications of it being a bit different are? Do you see what I mean? No. I guess what I'm getting at is scientific publications for me is more driven by the academics, doing their publications. The medical publications business we're talking about is much more this team of people supporting, working together to take those clinical trials into those journals. And it is a completely different process. And academics who've got lots of experience of writing papers, maybe for Nature or something, will find this a very different background. Is that making any more sense? Kat, tell me it's making a bit more sense. I'm just trying to get that sense of, as a writer, and I'm thinking of the academic writer who sits there going, well, I've got 6 publications, I know what I'm doing. Actually, it's a very different environment that they might be coming into. Can you just give me a flavor? Help me here. Just give me a bit of flavor.
Yeah, definitely.
What I'm talking about.
I haven't done a PhD, but I imagine if you did a PhD, you'd probably be getting publications as a result of that and the research that you do. So maybe that's more scientific communication. Whereas we work for pharma companies and we're working on the development of their drugs and the different life cycles of their drug. So yeah, I mean, that would be very different. Those two things are very different.
Yeah, I did do things like that in my academic life, and you just write the paper and you have your co-authors and you approve it and then you send it in. There's no, we have so many things to consider when we're doing medical publications, in particular when we're doing publications out of clinical trials. There is, as John alluded to earlier, a lot of regulation. It is very closely monitored and there are lots of requirements and things that we have to think about. So from the point of view of how we manage the process, it's different. I mean, the end point is exactly the same. You publish your research in an academic journal or a medical journal, but the process that we have to go through, which is why we have teams of people, and why when I was in industry and when John was in industry, you'd work with people like us to help facilitate that process. So it is the same but different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I just think there's an important context there. Just talk about the team a little bit. I mean, we've talked about writing, we've talked about, but just again, give me a sense. Andrea, I'll go with you. Just within the agency, as it were, give me a sense of who the different people are that might be working on account. So I mean, other than a medical writer, which sort of seems obvious.
Well, the writer is the obvious person. Certainly in publications, the writer has a hugely important role, because it is about developing really good quality scientific content. But it is a project like any other project. You know, you have to sort of plan it, you have to make it happen, you have to work with all the other people, like the authors. For example, the external authors are absolutely, you know, fundamental to this whole thing. We don't, you know, ghostwriting doesn't exist. It has to be a group effort, and the people whose work you are helping to support write is really important. You have project managers within our company, we call them sort of program support, who will make sure that all of the pieces come together. We'll be working on multiple things at any one time, and certainly with something like a scientific congress, you may be submitting 20-30 abstracts. You have to make sure that all those pieces are juggled. You've got the account managers, the client services people, who will be a key point of contact with the client. Obviously we have budgets, we have things that we have to follow. So it is a group of people that have to work together very closely. We have to get on regular calls. I don't do that personally myself anymore, but Kat and Roz will be able to talk about the sort of weekly status calls that they have to go through. So it's a process. It's not just writing. The scientific content development, absolutely the core of it all, but there are lots of things around it that have to happen to make it go through.
Good, thank you. And just for today, I just want to keep it at that sense that there is this team of people there, not, but the only obvious person just went into my head, and you know, editors, for instance. You know, there's a lot of editors are involved. I mean, again, people miss this sort of thing. You know, and agencies differ in terms of how they're set up and whether writers do edit. But there's a distinct group of editors who are involved, yes, and proofreaders, definitely, and things like this. So there's a team of people.
Apologies for not mentioning.
No, but I'll get beaten up later if I don't. So, but can I ask the same sort of question to John? I mean, you know, taking that client side, you know, you're not just sitting there organizing this, you've got a whole bunch of people to interact with and liaise with. So can you just give us a sense again of the sorts of people that might be involved on the client side, as it were?
Well, I mean, the thing about this business, whether you're on client or agency side, is
I was stumbling over that. I know.
It's multi. There's so many people that you work with, and there's so many bits in the cog. And we're just used to it working because everybody works together. Mm. Nobody can work in isolation. And if you pull a couple of those players, you know, out of that cog, the whole thing just grinds to a halt. So we're clearly, I would say, completely reliant on our agencies. You know, so good quality support from the agencies and the services that they provide. And then, of course, we've got the people that we work, all the different functions within the company that we have to interact with and work with. And you can see that diagram in the guide, which shows you, it's like showing you all the links.
Yeah. And
then we're also working. Then let's not forget these publishers, Congress secretariats, the external experts. We're interacting with them, and so are the agencies. So you've got this gigantic matrix, like a plate of spaghetti, and you can't actually disentangle it because it's all so closely related.
Excellent. I just think it's important people get that impression. So that's great. Okay, so lots of people involved. What I wanted to, I'm doing what I always do and running over time here. So I just wanted to finish with a couple of pointers for people. We've touched on it's a regulated environment. We've touched on implied there are guidelines and let's just throw a couple out there that people know. I mean, I would throw out GPP3 as an obvious one to go and look at to understand. And we know that GPP3 is now being worked on, so it'll be GPP4 sooner. A couple of you, Andrea, you're nodding, so you're going to go first. Just throw a couple of guidelines or places that people can go and find out more about that sort of aspect of things. Do you see what I'm saying?
But definitely look at the Good Publications Practice Guidelines. As you say, we're on number 3 now. Just about to see number 4, I would hope, sometime in the new year. You can look up I always get this the wrong way around. It's the ICMJ, International, oh God,
ICMJE.
Help me. ICMJ, it's the journal medical editors who have all the guidelines. When you submit an article to a journal, you tend to look at these guidelines. It will talk about the importance of authorship, you know, how you, you know, who can be an author, things like that. Those things are very important for us. It's probably worth looking at some of the publishing societies. So the ISMAP, so the International Society for Medical Publication Professionals, EMWA, the European Medical Writers Association, and the American version, AMWA. And all of those will have useful information on the sorts of things that we need to consider when we're doing publications. I don't know if anybody else wants to add. I'm slightly removed from the day-to-day publications writing, so I'm going to throw this back to Kat and Roz.
All right, Kat and Roz, have you got anything to add into that briefly?
A couple of the guidelines that we work with regularly are the consort guidelines. They're for randomized clinical trials, and the strobe guidelines are for observational trials. They're the two that we most often work with, but there are other ones. There's Prisma, strobe. I can't remember the rest of them, but there's
lots more.
Quite,
okay, we could go on along. So there's guidelines like that. Roz, do you have anything? I'm going to wrap this up and say, but Roz, have you got anything that you'd throw in there? And then I can come to John for a final word.
No, I think they've covered it.
Excellent. John, what would you say if you're trying to point somewhere places to go?
All of the above, and they're all in the guide. But the equator network, because that one covers the strobe consort, and there's 300 and something sets of guidelines in the equator network. So plenty of bedtime reading there for everybody.
Exactly. And I sort of wanted to get equator in there because it's an amazing resource of guidelines and stuff. Okay, right. Okay, look, we are a little bit out of time. I'm going to wrap this up. I think it's fascinating, and we could talk about some of this a lot more, but we've touched on a lot of good topics there, hopefully giving people some signposts. I know that I can say from all your points of view that you're happy for people to contact you via LinkedIn is the obvious way to do that. Yeah. So if anybody wants more information and ask some questions, please contact any of us, myself included. I will put a final plug in for the careers guide. If you're interested in working in pubs, then the careers guide is available at FirstMedCommsJob.com, where you'll find lots and lots more information about working in medcoms generally. And as I say, come to MedCommsNetworking.com to see what else we're doing. And for lots and lots of videos now, you can go to NetworkPharma TV. So they all work together. There's lots of information there. I'm going to wrap it up for today. I'm going to say a huge thank you to the panelists. To those of you who are listening today, don't all rush away. We've got 10 minutes and we've got a few specific questions we can pick off here. So we'll keep going for a little bit, but thank you very much, everybody. And just what I do now, I'm sorry, it's a thing now, guys, is I ask you all to wave at us and say goodbye. So quick wave and say goodbye. Bye.